Why do elected officials never mention the one tax you pay every single day without realizing it? Not income tax, not sales tax, not property tax. A hidden levy that silently transfers wealth from your savings account into the vaults of those who control the money supply. You're paying it right now as you watch this video. They call it monetary policy. History calls it something else. Legalized theft through currency debasement. Here's the mechanism they won't teach in economics class. When the Federal Reserve creates new dollars out of thin air, your existing dollars don't disappear. They just buy less, much less. Since the Fed's creation in 1913, the dollar has lost 97% of its purchasing power. That's not accidental inflation. That's systematic wealth extraction. And unlike every other tax, you never voted for it. Congress never debates it openly, and you can't opt out. The illusion that your money holds constant value while prices just happen to rise is the most profitable deception in financial history. Most people see inflation as an unfortunate side effect of complex economic forces. They're wrong. Inflation is the intended outcome, a feature, not a bug, of a system designed to tax your savings without ever sending you a bill. The architects knew exactly what they were creating. They said so explicitly in private correspondence, internal memos, and congressional testimony that never made headlines. Today, you'll discover the hidden history of how central banks turned inflation into a stealth tax. Learn the exact mechanism they used to extract wealth from savers and workers. See the shocking admissions from Fed officials themselves, and understand what you can do to stop paying this invisible tribute. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unseen it. And once you understand the game, you can stop being played. Step into the marble halls of Jekyll Island Club on November 22nd, 1910. Outside, cold Atlantic winds rattle the windows of this Georgia coastal resort. Inside, 7 men sit in a private dining room, surrounded by mahogany paneling and oil portraits of Gilded Age tycoons. They've traveled here in secret, literally. Senator Nelson Aldrich insisted they use only first names, no last names, to avoid recognition during the train journey. They told the resort staff they were on a duck hunting trip. They carried no hunting rifles. They carried something far more powerful, the blueprint for the Federal Reserve System. Nelson Aldrich, Republican whip and father-in-law to John D. Rockefeller Jr., sits at the head of the table, wearing a tailored 3-piece suit, gold watch chain glinting in the firelight. To his right, Frank Vanderlip, president of National City Bank, today's Citibank, nervously shuffles through financial projections. Across from him, Paul Warburg, representative of the Rothschild banking interests and recent German immigrant with a thick accent, sketches organizational charts on cream-colored stationery. Henry Davison from J.P. Morgan & Company smokes a cigar, watching with calculating eyes. They know what they're designing will reshape American finance for the next century. And they know Congress would never approve it if they understood its true purpose. Warburg speaks carefully, choosing his words. The system must appear decentralized to gain public acceptance, but ultimate control must remain centralized. He's explaining the psychological sleight of hand that will become the Fed's structure. 12 regional banks creating the illusion of distributed power, but actual authority concentrated in a board of governors appointed by politicians who, in turn, rely on these same bankers for campaign financing. Aldrich nods, understanding the game perfectly. They're not creating a government institution. They're creating a private banking cartel with government enforcement power. And its primary function, though they'll never state it publicly, is to generate inflation that serves as an invisible tax, transferring wealth from the productive economy to the financial sector. The historical record shows their calculations. They estimated they could maintain approximately 2 to 3% annual inflation indefinitely without triggering public revolt. Any higher, people might notice. Any lower, the wealth transfer would be insufficient. They discussed explicitly how this price stability mandate would actually mean guaranteed currency debasement, just slow enough that each generation would accept rising prices as normal. When Warburg's private correspondence was later published by his son, the admission was plain. The matter of a uniform discount rate was discussed and settled at Jekyll Island. This pattern wasn't new, just more sophisticated. When Roman emperors debased silver denarii by reducing silver content from 100% to 5% over 2 centuries, that was inflation taxation. When French kings clipped gold coins and reminted them at lower weight, that was inflation taxation. When British monarchs devalued the pound sterling to fund wars, that was inflation taxation. The Jekyll Island conspirators simply industrialized the process, made it mathematical, gave it respectable academic terminology, and hid it inside a quasi-governmental institution. 3 years later, the Federal Reserve Act passed Congress on December 23, 1913, deliberately scheduled during Christmas recess when many opposing congressmen had left Washington. The invisible tax machine was born. The invisible tax machine didn't wait long to demonstrate its power. By 1920, just 7 years after the Fed's creation, wholesale prices had doubled, a 100% inflation rate extracting half of everyone's purchasing power. Then the mechanism revealed its cruelest feature. It's not consistent. It's a ratchet. Prices rise dramatically, then stabilize at the new higher level, never returning to previous affordability. Your parents' generation could buy a house for $25,000, not because houses were cheaper, because dollars were worth more. The Fed had stolen less of the currency's value at that point. Take Sarah Mitchell, a Cleveland school teacher in 1940. She earned $1,800 annually, a solid middle-class salary, and diligently saved $5,000 over 15 years, enough to buy a modest home outright. She kept it in a savings account at Cleveland Trust Company, earning 2% interest, believing she was being financially responsible. Then came World War II, and the Fed's printing presses accelerated. By 1945, her $5,000 remained nominally intact in her account statement, still showed $5,000, but prices had risen 28% during the war. Her purchasing power had evaporated by $400. She hadn't spent a penny. She hadn't made any poor investment decisions. The Federal Reserve had simply printed money to finance war bonds, and her savings absorbed the loss. When she finally tried to buy that home in 1946, the same house now cost $7,200. Her 15 years of disciplined saving had been systematically taxed through inflation, and she'd never received a bill, never got to vote on it, never even understood what had happened. She died in 1971, still renting, wondering where she'd gone wrong financially. She'd gone nowhere wrong. The system had gone exactly as designed. Or consider Thomas Henderson, a Detroit auto worker at Ford in 1965, making $6,500 annually. Excellent wages that supported a wife, 3 children, and a mortgage with enough left over to save for retirement. He stored $200 monthly in a pension fund, watching it grow to $45,000 by 1980. On paper, he was set for retirement. Then came the inflation crisis of the 1970s. Federal Reserve Chairman Arthur Burns, under pressure from President Nixon to print money to fund Vietnam War deficits and Great Society programs, expanded the money supply by 10% annually. Inflation hit 13.5% in 1980. Thomas's $45,000 retirement fund, accumulated over 15 years of sacrifice, lost $27,000 in purchasing power in just 5 years. He'd worked overtime shifts, skipped family vacations, driven the same rusty pickup for a decade, all to build that nest egg. When he retired in 1985, his savings could purchase roughly what $18,000 would have bought when he started saving. He took a part-time job at 67 years old as a hardware store clerk. He worked until 74, then died 6 months after finally stopping. The Fed had taxed away his golden years through inflation, and the official story was simply prices went up. No, they didn't. Dollar value went down, deliberately. The mechanism is mathematically precise. When the Fed creates $1 trillion new dollars and injects them into the economy through bond purchases or loans to banks, that's $1 trillion of new claims on the same quantity of goods and services. If the economy produces 20 trillion in annual output, you've just diluted everyone's existing dollars by 5%. Every savings account, every fixed pension, every cash holding loses 5% of purchasing power instantly. But here's the crucial detail. The money enters the economy at specific points first. Banks get it. Government contractors get it. Financial institutions get it. They spend it before prices rise. Then it ripples outward to corporate borrowers, to asset markets, to real estate speculators. Finally, months or years later, it reaches workers' wages and retirees' fixed incomes. But by then, prices have already adjusted upward. The people closest to the money printer gain. The people furthest, savers, wage earners, retirees, lose. This is called the Cantillon effect. And it's not a side effect. It's the point. Think this is just history? The inflation tax is hitting harder right now than any point since the 1970s. And the mechanism is identical. Since 2008, the Federal Reserve has created more money than in all previous history combined, expanding its balance sheet from $870 billion to over $8.9 trillion by 2022. That's not economic policy jargon. That's dollar debasement, and you paid for it through purchasing power loss. Jerome Powell, current Fed chairman, stood before Congress in July 2022 and admitted inflation was much too high at 9.1%, the highest in 40 years. But notice what he didn't say. That the Fed's own policies caused it. Between March 2020 and December 2021, the Fed created $4.7 trillion through quantitative easing, a euphemism for printing money and buying government bonds and mortgage securities. Then, inflation is transitory, Powell assured us in June 2021. Translation: ignore the wealth extraction until it's too late to protect yourself. By the time they acknowledged the problem, your savings had already been taxed. Let's make this personal. If you had $50,000 in a savings account in January 2021 and you did nothing, by December 2022, that money lost approximately $9,100 in purchasing power due to cumulative inflation exceeding 18% over those 2 years. You were taxed $9,100. You never received a Form 1040 for it. Congress never voted on it. You just woke up poorer. The same groceries that cost $100 in 2020 cost $131 by 2023, and climbing. Your raise of 3 to 5%. It didn't keep pace. You lost ground. That's the inflation tax working exactly as designed. Historical pattern. Then, the Fed financed World War II by printing money, creating 28% inflation 1940-1945. Now, the Fed financed COVID stimulus by printing money, creating 18% inflation 2020-2023. Then, workers and savers bore the burden while banks and government contractors benefited first. Now, asset holders, real estate stocks, gained from cheap Fed money while wage earners watched purchasing power evaporate. Then Fed officials claimed they were managing the economy. Now Jerome Powell claims the same. The playbook hasn't changed in 80 years because it works. Not for you, for them. Recent admission by former Fed Governor Andrew Levin to Bloomberg in October 2023. The Fed's inflation was a regressive tax on working families. Finally, someone said the quiet part out loud. It's not inflation. It's taxation without representation. And it's accelerating. So what actually protects wealth when central banks are systematically devaluing currency? History gives us 3 proven strategies based on what survivors did when inflation taxation accelerated. Action. Step 1. Exit the currency system. partially through hard assets. The inflation tax only works on assets denominated in depreciating currency: savings accounts, bonds, cash, money market funds. It doesn't work on assets with intrinsic value. Immediately convert 20–30% of liquid savings into physical assets that maintain purchasing power, independent of Fed policy. Specifically, physical gold and silver stored outside the banking system, not paper gold ETFs, actual metal you control, productive land or real estate that generates income, or equipment and tools with ongoing utility value. Historical precedent. During 1970s inflation, gold rose from 35-ounce 1971 to 850-ounce 1980. A 2,329% gain that didn't just beat inflation, it protected purchasing power, while dollar holders lost 60%. Those who held even 25% in gold maintained their wealth. Those who stayed 100% in cash or bonds were systematically impoverished. Action step 2. Become a strategic borrower, not a saver, in inflationary periods. This sounds counterintuitive, but the mechanism is simple. Inflation destroys the real value of fixed-rate debts just as it destroys cash savings. Eliminate all variable-rate debt immediately. Credit cards, adjustable mortgages, lines of credit that will become more expensive as rates rise. But consider acquiring fixed-rate debt secured by hard assets, particularly 30-year fixed mortgages, at today's rates to purchase property. Why? In high inflation, you're repaying the loan with depreciated dollars while the asset appreciates in nominal terms. Historical precedent. Homeowners with 1970s fixed-rate mortgages at 8% saw their debt become trivially easy to repay by the 1980s, as wages rose with inflation, but their payments stayed fixed. They effectively paid off mortgages with devalued currency. Renters who responsibly avoided debt saw rents increase 150% while building zero equity. The Fed's inflation tax benefits borrowers and punishes savers. Action. Step 3. Demand compensation in multiple currencies or inflation index terms. Your salary is a currency-denominated claim on future purchasing power. Negotiate raises that explicitly track real inflation, not the understated CPI. Demand contracts indexed to commodity prices or multiple currency baskets, or create secondary income streams in foreign currencies or cryptocurrency. If your employer pays in depreciating dollars at a fixed rate, you're absorbing the Fed's inflation tax directly through wage erosion. Historical precedent. During Argentina's repeated inflation crises, professionals who demanded payment in US dollars or indexed their fees to official inflation rates maintained their living standards. Those who accepted peso salaries saw purchasing power collapse by 80% plus in single years. The same applies now. If you're paid in dollars only, you're fully exposed to Fed policy. Diversify your income denominations. You now understand what took me years to piece together from Fed documents, historical records, and economic data they don't teach in school. The inflation tax isn't a conspiracy theory. It's documented policy with a century of evidence. The only question is whether you'll keep paying it or take action to protect yourself. Time matters because inflation, once it accelerates, moves faster than preparation. Position yourself now while you still can, because when the next crisis hits and the printing presses restart, it'll be too late. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. Subscribe now because in next video, I'm revealing exactly how the Federal Reserve's relationship with the Treasury Department creates a debt spiral that guarantees future inflation and why the fiscal crisis of the 2030s is already baked in.